Despicable Me is the highest-grossing animated film franchise of all time, by a wide margin. It is also, simultaneously, one of the most infamous. While the vitriol it receives is lessened over time, whether it be a result of the kids who grew up with it now being able to vocalize their opinions on a larger scale, or people finally realizing the 2010s obsession with Minion hit was maybe a little overblown. Either way, none of that, or the relatively low review scores each of them got, especially from those later films, have gotten in the way of the company behind them pumping out sequel after sequel after spin-off after spin-off sequel after sequel after spin-off sequel. Premiering in 2010, the first Despicable Me was the film to start and skyrocket Illumination. These guys are the masters of making films that brick the box office. And hot. That is no exaggeration, they make an average of $700 million per film. And that's not to acknowledge their bigger releases like the Mario movie, which made over $1.3 billion. But before then, their most reliable moneymaker has been, and probably always will be, the Despicable Me franchise. Or more accurately, the Minions brand. And even though it's no longer their top-performing franchise, I'd still consider the success of Despicable Me way more impressive than Mario Bros. Oh, the Mario movie made $1 billion? I'm so shocked. They could have shit in a bucket called it the Mario movie and people still would have lined up to see it. Whereas Despicable Me came from nowhere. I remember before then it was all about Madagascar and Bolt and Kung Fu Panda. And then suddenly Despicable Me came out and everybody was talking about it. You know, as babies. During the last week of primary school, everyone who was stupid enough to come in got a couple celebration chocolates and a movie of our choice. And it was collectively decided that Despicable Me is how we'd like to close out this chapter of our lives. It's all been downhill from there. My feelings towards the Despicable Me franchise, in retrospect at least, has always felt like that image where one half is the happy baby and the other the serious-looking toddler. That was me between the first two Despicable Me films. Suddenly it was played out. Illumination was a crappy company who pumped out bottom-of-the-barrel slop to appeal to as wide a market as humanly possible, and therefore, their movies lacked any soul. That became the sentiment online, a sentiment that has only started to shift in the past couple years. I wonder what caused that to happen. So it's time for me to finally confront my yellow pill-shaped demons. I've been pretty harsh towards this series. Some of that, I'm sure, a result of teenage angst. And no matter what I thought, it didn't stop Illumination from continuing to make them. I can't believe they didn't listen to me. And so every 2.5 years for the past 16 years, we've seen the release of a new Despicable Me movie. Or Minions. Totaling to a whopping 6 films. And I think it's time to watch them all. I mean, there's a 7th one coming out in just a few months, so I gotta catch up on the lore. So let's finally answer a question that's been on my mind for the past, I don't know, like week. Were the Despicable Me movies really that bad? And the 2 Minion movies, but that's too long for a title. But before moving on, I want to give a quick shout out to our partners over at Factor. This video is sponsored by Factor. I live the life of a YouTuber. With all the work I schedule for myself on any given week, it can be easy to neglect my own health and wellness. So I've been trying out Factor recently, and I can honestly say, this meal service provides a clear path towards wellness, fitness, and consistency. Factor takes the stress out of meal planning by providing you with nutritious, ready-to-eat meals that are dietitian approved, and ready to eat in just 2 minutes. It takes all the hassle out of prepping, cooking, and cleanup. Heat that meal up and enjoy. Factor offers a rotating menu of over 100 different options, whether it's breakfast, lunch, dinner, salads, or even smoothies. Factor has a wide selection of options so that you can keep your experience tailored to your lifestyle. One of my favorite from them lately is their Daily Greens, which is an easy-to-prepare drink that helps fill nutritional gaps and fuel your body with a clean, nutrient-dense formula that includes ingredients such as kale, spinach, ashwagandha, and tons of other products and vitamins. It's a simple-to-make drink that you can take daily to give yourself sustainable caffeine-free energy. Factor provides me with a sense of stability. I can manage how many meals I want per week, browse their rotating menu, and select what I want with virtually no hassle. On top of that, they use real food with real ingredients, none of those nasty refined seed oils, refined sugars, or artificial colors and sweeteners. Just clean, high-quality standards is what keeps Factor a step ahead of the rest. And you can be too with nutrition that fits your goals. It's never too late to get started on your wellness journey. Give Factor a shot by heading to Factor75.com or scan the QR code on the screen and use my code LSMarkFDG to get 50% off your first Factor box plus free daily greens. That's code LSMarkFDG to get 50% off your first Factor box plus free daily greens. Thanks to Factor for sponsoring this video. Back to the Minions. Despite feeling as if the first film just dropped out of nowhere from this brand new studio, its production goes all the way back to 2007, where writer Sergio Pablos pitched his idea about a villain main character. Wow, what a rarely done concept for a kids movie, at least at the time came out the exact same year as Megamind. Whoops. It completely mopped the floor with it though, grossing almost twice as much at the box office. And really, it's not hard to see why. I mean, it released first, which of course is gonna help. But I don't know, this was obviously gonna be a hell of a lot more marketable than this blue fucking raised eyebrow ass. Starting out under the working title Evil Me, which is a horrible name, the concept was picked up by Chris Meledandri, who had just founded his own animation studio after leaving Fox's animation division. With this, he brought on Pierre Coffin and Chris Renaud to direct, had all the animation done in France to save costs. These yellow guys got added somewhere along the way, and we ended up with Despicable Me. Won a Kids' Choice Award.
And it's got a cavity that can only be filled with children.
What? Again, I thought this was the greatest thing ever when I first saw it, and I was not alone. I don't think I've seen it in like 10 years, but it was insane going back to it after all this time and realizing just how much I remembered. Gru saying, light bulb? Everyone fucking quoted that when we were 8. How'd I forget about that? Curse you, tiny toilet, quoting that in the playground all day long. Given how big this franchise would end up getting, it's kinda crazy going back to this first one and seeing the idea in its purest form. Like, this was clearly not written with any kind of franchise potential in mind. The plot is so simple, and I mean that in the best way possible. I was really surprised to learn this was not based off an existing storybook like the way a lot of DreamWorks movies are, like The Bad Guys Are Home. The fuck is that? I always thought the way this film opened was super clever, as a random family's holiday to Egypt is disrupted by someone stealing the pyramids. It's such an absurd concept that perfectly conveys the tone of the film, like, hey, this shit is dumb, just roll with it. It's here we meet Gru, the world's greatest supervillain who has long passed his prime. He lives at home alone with his army of minions who either he created or employed, it's not really clear. And with this new guy seemingly up in the game and stealing the spotlight, he decides he's gonna commit the most heinous act in all of villainy, stealing the moon. It's such a basic concept for your movie, but I love how much they grind it through the real-world logic. Like, sure, you can steal the moon, as long as you have the capital. Now he's gotta go to the evil bank and ask for a loan. An evil loan! It's a really fun way to explore the concept of villains being so common in this world. It's like they have their own rules, their own economy running adjacent to the real world. Unless this bank is also run by the government, but I don't think that's commentary they meant to imply. So, Gru needs a shrink ray to prove he's capable of pulling off this heist and get his loan. The only shrink ray being in possession of this new villain, Vector, who's also like a Nepo baby and Jason Segel. And so Gru makes the most logical choice when presented with this. He's just gonna adopt 3 children who can deliver cookies to his house, so he can sneak in while Vector is distracted. Sure. From here, you can probably expect where things go. He doesn't care about these girls at first, but over the course of the film starts to open up his icy heart to them, goes to steal the moon, but at what cost? Comes back, apologizes, saves them or something, I don't know, shows he cares, that's the point. You've seen this story before, but it's completely elevated by Gru as a protagonist. He carries the film. First of all, his design just rocks. It is so strong. His proportions are so exaggerated, especially compared to the world around him, and so it helps him be this striking figure in every shot he's in, especially when wearing all black in such a colorful film. And Steve Carell, while definitely hasn't entirely found the voice yet, does a decent job with this strange, non-specific Eastern European-ish accent. He stands out. Again, when it comes to these two films, it is no wonder Despicable Me performed better. They also do a solid job of making him a sympathetic protagonist, us getting a small glimpse into his backstory where he's completely emotionally neglected by his mother. He wanted to be an astronaut, she never cared, now he's gonna steal the moon so people finally notice him. It's not like masterful storytelling or anything, but, you know, all the pieces are here, it all works. Which is more than I could say about these later films. The 3 girls are treated more as a unit here than anything else. Margot, Edith, and Agnes. To me, their designs always just seemed like the fucking Chipettes from Alvin and the Chipmunks. Margot is the older, responsible one, with glasses. Edith is the crazy troublemaker, and Agnes is just the most adorable freaking kid ever. It's so fluffy, I'm gonna die. That sure didn't get run into the ground. They work more as props in this movie than actual characters, which is good because it's about how they change Gru as a person, you know? But we get enough to at least care about him. They got shitty lives and a shitty orphanage where this shitty lady just hates them for no reason. And so when they're treated like shit at Gru's house, it's like, Damn, yeah, but at least it's better than what they had going on back there. I wanted a nuclear bomb bad. Fucking lucky.
I shrink the moon. I grab the moon. I sit on the toilet. What?
Not that they even focus on that aspect for very long, as pretty quickly Gru starts to realize he likes him and likes being a dad, which starts to distract him from the mission to the annoyance of his friend and assistant, Dr. Nefario. It took me ages to realize this guy was voiced by fucking Russell Brand. Why? Hop foreshadowing. You know what's crazy? I've talked about this film for like 5 minutes now, yet haven't once spoken about what the Minions do. And that's because despite being all over the posters, trailers, and merchandising, they don't really do that much. They serve no plot relevance, they're literally just Gru's helpers. Anytime he needs to go on a mission or needs someone to take care of the girls or whatever, he sends the Minions, who are very silly and wacky, and in small doses like this, yeah, you can see why they caught on so hard. They have funny moments, typically being the biggest source of slapstick in the franchise. I like that because they're so abstract in design, you can do whatever fucking horrific thing you want with them, and it'll remain funny. You can injure them, use them as fodder, punch them, blow them up, anything, without any threat of parents coming out crying because of violence. You know, except for this guy. I always felt bad for him, roaming the deepest, darkest reaches of space, completely isolated from the world. That minion is in hell and no one can hear him scream. But it's really smart and gives the film a very slight edge, which is much needed with such a schmaltzy story. One thing that certainly doesn't hold up as well as I remembered are the visuals. I thought this was the best looking thing ever when it released, but man, it is starting to show its age. Gru's horrifyingly tiny teeth that could chomp on the head of any child that does him wrong. The minions have this slight off-model look to them the whole movie. And worst of all, the lighting is just fucking gross at times. Some shots are rendered in such a weird way, creating this ugly gray and black shading on the characters, and it is just so unpleasant to look at. A lot of older CGI films have this issue, but whereas it works in Shrek due to everything and everyone having these ultra-realistic textures, the Despicable Me characters have such simple designs that it becomes way more uncanny. The characters constantly feeling 2 steps away from hitting a T-pose. You can definitely tell what their trailer shots were, the roller coaster sequence, Gru getting onto his rocket. They all clearly had much more time put into making them look nice. But honestly, it only ends up making the weaker shots stand out more. Speaking of standing out, the soundtrack for this film was a huge hit, having a select few songs written and performed by Pharrell Williams. Wait, I thought he was a Lego. This was right before he was starting to hit it super mainstream, and I do think these movies played a small role in that, especially the second one. But he did some bangers here too, including the main theme, aptly titled Despicable Me. 5-year-old me saying bad morning to the teacher. True that, bro. Yeah, I don't know, I wasn't expecting it, but the first Despicable Me is pretty good. It's of course not turning any heads, and if it weren't for introducing the world to the Minions, I don't think it would have had as much lasting power as it did, for better or worse. And I could give, like, the most minor of nitpicks ever to the plot. Like, it always confused me that after adopting the girls, they still have to go and make their, like, cookie-selling rounds when you were doing that to help the world. I don't know. Whatever, I still think it accomplishes what it sets out to do, and that's tell a charming story about a supervillain taking in 3 orphan girls for nefarious purposes, but comes out of it, their father. Aww. It was a big deal, like I've said, grossed over $500 million, spawned 5 sequels, a fucking theme park based off their fictional theme park, and all the merchandising was honing in on one aspect: the Minions. Sure, you'd get a Gru figure or a fluffy unicorn plush, but the Minions were destined to be a merchandising juggernaut. They're just so universal. It's the perfect design, and Illumination knew it. Suddenly, you couldn't avoid the Minions. They were inescapable. If you were, like, alive in the early to mid-2010s, crazy that I even have to say that, someone out there watching this was not. Hi, you do well in school today? Brush your teeth? But if you were there, you would have seen the Minion Wars. The babies and Facebook moms who rallied with Minion toys and low-resolution memes. And on the other side, there were the edgy, cool teenagers who hated the Minions and everything they stood for. And at a brief point in my life, I loved the Minions. I was Minion-pilled. One time my family went on a holiday to Spain and there was a claw machine in the game room that was just filled with Minions, and whoever set it up clearly didn't know that you're also meant to, like, you know, change the strength of the claw, and so I just sat there winning Minions. I got like 12 of them. Gave them all to my cousin, and so for like 3 years, he slept in bed at night, surrounded by Minions. All thanks to me. But by the time Despicable Me 2 had been released 3 years later, I had switched sides. Minions suck. They're overrated, the first movie wasn't that good, but I'll still watch the second one just to, just to laugh at it, how bad it is. Oh, it's actual fucking dog shit? Okay, this'll be easier than I thought. My favorite fun fact about this movie is that the villain was originally supposed to be voiced by Al Pacino, who, after recording all his dialogue, left the movie over creative differences. Like, bro signed on to Despicable Me 2 actually expecting it to be like art or something. Also, Dunkachino is fine, but this drew the line. The marketing for this film was insane. It felt inescapable. Gru, the girls, and the Minions are back, but mostly the Minions. I was like 11 when it came out, so I was still in my I'll go with my sister to watch whatever the new animated movie is era. And I remember fucking hating it. It just screamed, fuck, didn't think we'd get this far. And so they're just desperately trying to find any narrative. It's been an undisclosed amount of time since the events of the last film, and Gru has given up the whole villainy thing, leading to Dr. Nefario quitting for a new job and Gru getting recruited by the AVL, the Anti-Villain League. They've been working to stop villains from committing their crimes, yet Gru is only now hearing about them. Being informed that one shop owner inside the local mall has stolen a top-secret mutagen for unknown purposes, and so they're sending him undercover to discover who it is. But this time he won't be working alone as they pair him up with Lucy Wilde. She's quirky and badass and super nice. Huh, it's like she's the total opposite of Gru. I wonder what this will lead to. I really do not care for Lucy much in this film. Kristen Wiig does a solid job voicing her, but I don't know, to make her seem more confident, they in turn had to make Gru a complete joke. Sure, he got beat down on a ton in the first one, but it's because he was like, the bad guy. He wanted to steal the moon and take advantage of children. Should probably reword that. But he was the villain, so seeing him constantly shit on was like cathartic, Yet here he's the good guy. Despicable Me is no longer an accurate title for this franchise. He only spends the first movie being despicable. But I don't know, seeing Gru constantly get shit on like he's some kind of incompetent loser just makes me question why they even felt the need to hire him in the first place. They even acknowledge this later in the film. I'm at least glad they decided to do more with his relationship with the girls, but the pink one, I don't know their name, have their own little thing going on. Margot starts to fall for this guy, the son of the Mexican restaurant owner who Gru suspects is the evildoer, and so he tries to step in and prevent them from being close.
And my dream is to one day play video games for a living.
That aged amazingly. The other plot point is Agnes being sad that they don't have a mother, especially since the school is having everyone recite a poem about how much they love their mum, which is just a seriously cruel thing to force the children to do, even when they don't have one. I wonder what this plot point will go to, especially since Gru just met a new lady who's the total opposite of him. Who cares about any of that shit, though? They know what you're here to see, and it's the Minions. They've been given much more of the spotlight. They pretty much take up a third of the movie, and the whole plot eventually winds up revolving around them. Over the course of the film, we see them continuously get kidnapped. But by who? It's like a mystery flick, and so a majority of the film is spent with this repetitive-ass cycle of Minions getting kidnapped, Gru and Lucy snoop around the mall looking for the culprit, even though Gru knows who it is and nobody believes him, even though the AVL should have a database on all villains, so just fucking cross-reference that shit. It's a super boring movie, shockingly so. Again, it screams no ideas, and when you start to expand what was once an incredibly straightforward world, everything is normal, but there are supervillains, it quickly overcomplicates things. Why is there an anti-villain league? Why is it so secretive? Why do they not believe Gru that it's this guy? That's what they brought him here to do. How did Gru not know about these guys? We're led to believe he was the most despicable man on Earth in the first one, yet they never got in the way of things. And as we'll later see in future films, he fucking knew about the AVL since he was a child, so I don't know. I know, Minions lore, who cares? Me, but believe me, I don't hate this movie for minor reasons like this. I mostly hate it because of how fucking boring it is. My favorite moments are honestly the segments with the Minions, and it's because, and okay, I might get some flack for saying this, but I kind of find the Minions funny. Is this what it means to get older? Finding the Minions and their silly antics charming? Who knows, maybe it's because of how vitriolic the world was to the Minions during the mid-2010s, me included in that, but in retrospect, they're infinitely more entertaining than anything Gru does. Gru worked so well in that first movie because he had, an arc, It was about him realizing the source of his despicable nature and realizing he can fill that void in his heart with these children who genuinely care for him. Sure, it's got silly fart guns and tiny toilets, but by God, it is about something. What is Despicable Me 2 about? Gru now needs to find a lady friend and goes on a bad diet, not realizing that Lucy has been in front of him the whole time. And by the whole time, I mean like 2 fucking days.
I just did a boom boom.
I just don't buy their relationship at all. Again, they're opposites, that's it. They assume that is more than enough to buy them being soulmates or whatever, but no. They barely interact beyond the surface level. We don't know if they have any common interests because they don't share them. And then they get together in the end because that makes for the most appropriate conclusion. Again, anything with Gru or the girls could not care less, but the Minions though. They are just, like, violent and horny. Like, that is not me looking into this too hard. They just want to fuck, and it makes me laugh. Am I, like, a boomer now? Does calling myself a boomer make me more of a boomer? Oh god. Way late into the film, we find out they've been kidnapped by the guy that Gru thought was the villain the entire time, with him wanting to test out the mutagen on them to create an army of crazy purple minions who can help him take over the world. Oh no! And then he kidnaps Lucy and wants to launch her into a volcano? Oh no! This is because fucking Dr. Nefario started working for him and helped him come up with a plan? Oh no! But Gru saves the day and all the minions, and he marries Lucy and lives happily ever after, while a minion pretends to lick some lady's ass. Wait, what the fuck was that last bit? For all its faults, story and character-wise, I do have to admit this film looks great. Undoubtedly a massive improvement over the first, without question. It's so much more expressive, especially with the minions, which help their more exaggerated slapstick humor. I love the more simple background style, them all having this slick retro look. Reminded me a lot of Universal's City Walk. And Pharrell Williams outdid himself in the soundtrack this time around. Happy came from this movie? That was like the biggest fucking song ever for like 2 years. They could have made this film's budget back on music sales alone. Didn't need it though, as Despicable Me 2 was an even bigger hit than the last, making $970 million and solidifying that the Minions are here to stay. I'm sure it also helped fund their other projects too. That's right, Illumination was not some one-hit wonder, soon launching The Secret Life of Pets, Sing, The Lorax, The
Grinch. Who the fuck's the Grinch?
And, dude, okay, Purple Minions, genius idea. You can now sell kids on a whole nother wave of Minions merch. I think it's safe to say this is when the Minions truly bordered on the edge of oversaturation. You could not escape these fuckers. Around this time, I remember everyone, including me, was playing Minion Rush, a Temple Run clone that I put way too much time into. Dude, when they added the theme park update, I was like, damn, what, that's the theme park from Despicable Me. There's a classic childhood memory. But all the success doesn't change the fact that I think this movie fucking sucks. It is, like, dreadful. Going into this, I was anticipating changing my mind. I was probably so harsh on it because, you know, it was the popular thing to hate at the time, right? Wrong, it sucks. For the first 20 or so minutes, you almost think it'll be an improvement, but once he gets recruited and they start this fucking whodunit mystery that gets solved in the first 30 seconds, then act like it's a surprise 30 minutes later, it just becomes dreadful. The Minions being so fucking awesome doesn't stop the plot from feeling pointlessly dragged out. Like, why spend 40 minutes on this question of, who's kidnapping the Minions? When Gru already pointed out that this was the bad guy. It's him! Maybe if it was all just a red herring, you know, the villain was someone else entirely, you know, well, stupid twist. Would have at the very least been something other than, oh, I guess you were right, Gru. Sorry we hired you to do this job and then didn't trust your instincts, which is what, you know, your fucking job was to do. Why am I mad about this? It's fucking Despicable Me 2. It was gonna be a hit no matter what, and Illumination only wanted to go bigger. And so in their very next film, we gotta see the Minion takeover fully realized. I remember the day in 2015 when the Minions trailer came out. I was 13 years old, sitting in science class, and everyone said, huh, I lame. Out of ideas much, Hollywood. Crazy to think this is where we're at. I was so against the Minions by this point, so was most people my age. Ended up seeing it twice in theaters. I went to go watch it with my little cousin one weekend, and then the next it was my friend's birthday, and so we all went to the theater to watch Ted 2, and they wouldn't let us in because we were 13. So we had to watch Minions again. And to be honest, despite my Minion prejudice at the time, I didn't think very strongly about it one way or the other. I remember coming out of it thinking it was, fine. But I recall going online and being surprised at just how much folks hated this shit, talking about it like it was the death of cinema. I must have watched that Ralph the Movie Maker review a million times and found myself completely parroting his opinions.
When I draw a simple smiley face, it's adorable. Look at it. So cute, I could stick my penis in its mouth.
Got pretty bad reviews, not even a positive audience score that's genuinely hard to accomplish. And after watching it, I mean, yeah, it's pretty fucking bad, but mostly inoffensive. And maybe that is the issue, like Illumination aren't really heated for making awful movies, just incredibly bland ones. Pandering to stupid kids and their stupid mothers. Shoving a ton of cute things in their face and hoping that's a substitute for an actual story. That only works if it's Mario, apparently. And you know, so in that case, it is an awful film that knows it does not have to try to make $1 billion, but I just can't find it in me to get that genuinely pissed about it. I will not lie though, it features a fucking dogshit plot. It's here we learn the origins of the Minions. The world's been waiting to find out. So, one day the Minions came from the ocean with one mission, to serve the most despicable person throughout history. Everyone has made the joke, but it will never not be funny that the writers had to conveniently trap the Minions in a cave throughout Hitler's reign. Oh, but Napoleon is fine. While in this cave, however, we see the Minions grow depressed. Without a master to serve, they will die somehow. And so it's with this that 3 Minions set out on a quest to find a master. We got Kevin, the leader, Stuart, the cool one, and Bob, the fat kid Minion. I think he's a kid. It sucks that the story for this film feels so hard because I actually think that's a great idea. I just wish it committed more to our main characters. Like, yeah, they're Minions, I'm aware, but we need something more than these vague personality traits to give a shit about them individually. We've seen Minions die before and have only ever been expected to laugh. Oh what, I meant to give a shit about these 3 specifically? It's here I think the film would have benefited greatly from giving Kevin more attention as our lead. What if, instead of treating the Minions like a complete unit for the first 15 minutes, we actually see their evolution through Kevin's POV? I mean, I have to assume they live forever. I don't want to be the one to ask any questions about the Minion procreation situation. What if we get to see how being an individual Minion is? We see their interpersonal relationships, what hardships they gotta face. Why Kevin feels like he needs to prove himself for his Minion friends. It's like how a movie works. And yeah, that would be dumb, but fuck it, play into that we're focusing so hard on this one Minion who looks exactly like every other Minion. I mean, I know the answer to why they didn't do this. It would mean the film actually has to be about something. It can't be as broad and inoffensive as possible. The trailer needs more Minion crowd shots. But it's like they want it both ways, because when Kevin is seeing who wants to join, we learn that he clearly does have his own opinions on Stuart and Bob as individuals. He doesn't really want either of them to join. But then, it's just dropped, it's never brought up again, and they go back to being treated as a unit. Either way, their journey for a master leads them to VillainCon, where they're introduced to Scarlet Overkill, who after being impressed by the Minions, has them serve her in stealing the Queen of England's crown. If that's what the movie was about, it would be fine, but at a certain point, it kinda just jumps off the rails and never gets back on. Like 2/3 in after failing to steal it, Bob randomly decides to pull the sword from the stone, and is now crowned King of England, which makes Scarlet jealous and now tries to kill them, and Kevin has to stop her by turning it into a giant, which has never been something we're aware was possible before now, and then Kevin pees on Stuart and Bob. I don't envy them having to make an entire story around 3 characters who can't speak coherent sentences, but at a certain point it really starts to drag, you just wishing it would end before a new plot point gets introduced as the film yet again diverts its focus. Even ending on this fucking stupid Marvel moment where we see the Minions find a baby Gru like I meant to stand up and clap.
He was perfect. He was despicable.
It's just an overly long, unfocused film. Like, why would the Minions care about being the King of England? They wanted a fucking master. That's what the plot was about. It was never about their living situation. Oh, but we gotta have the montage of the Minions causing havoc in Buckingham Palace. We just gotta! The one thing I do like is that there are still occasional moments that recapture the humor I liked from the first Despicable Me. Like, if there were one animated film I would expect to see our main character be hung from a noose, it wouldn't be fucking Minions. There's some mildly edgy jokes, and maybe it's because this one feels like they're trying to make the Minions way more cutesy, but they stood out and caught me off guard.
Need any help?
Oh, way to go, guys.
Also, the animation is genuinely great looking. While not matching the quality of Pixar or even DreamWorks, I think Illumination is masterful at making really clean looking movies. Now, that isn't always a good thing. It also results in some of their films appearing incredibly bland. Secret Life of Pets looks like it could be fucking AI generated. But it does appeal to a very wide demographic, and in ways I appreciate that there is a big animation studio who realizes you don't need to pump $150 million into your animated film to make it appealing. This is one of Illumination's best looking films, to this day. There's a lot of bloom which really helps the minions stand out. I find they often ranged from a very pale to borderline orange color at times in the previous movies, but here is where I think they really landed on a final look. And, okay, if I'm being honest, while on its own it's a pretty bad film, I still think I take this over Despicable Me 2. Sure, it's arguably more shallow, but at least it knows what it is. A series of scenarios that force the minions to wreak havoc. We see them throughout history, in the Ice Age, in New York, and Orlando, they're in the 60s, go to a convention, head to London. There's a lot packed in. Almost too much. But I will take that any day over an hour and a half of Despicable Me 2 meandering around a fucking mall the entire time, waiting for the perfect moment to reveal its half-baked mystery. Like, sure, Minions is bad, but I don't know, it's not like it's gonna rot your kid's brain or anything. That's genuinely how people were talking about this shit. That's how I was talking about this shit. And maybe it's just because we now have Cocomelon and AI Slop, but these days your kid could be watching a whole lot worse than the Minions movie. Fuck it, I'd let my kid watch the Minion movie. I will let you know, I'll have my kid watch the Minion movie when it comes out. I will sacrifice him/her for the greater good, studying what exposure to Minions does to a child over a prolonged period of time. Anyways, it made $1 billion, Illumination's first $1 billion movie. I mean, how could it possibly fail? And if Despicable Me 2 was the rise of the Minions, then I think this movie was their peak. The last period of time where you could truly say the Minions were unavoidable. Merchandising for this movie was everywhere, and the box office success only further proved this was not a mere fad. The Minions had already been around for half a decade with no signs of slowing down, and so it made complete sense to keep the ball rolling. And so only 2 years later we saw the next installment in the Despicable Me franchise. For reference, this is our 4th film in 7 years. It took Shrek it. Okay, so at this point, I was purely hate watching these. You know, for a guy who hated the Minions so much, I sure did go and watch them all. I was dreading this one for a variety of reasons. First being, well, it's Despicable Me 3. But second, the villain was gonna have this whole 80s thing going on, which was quickly becoming an incredibly over-referenced era. Stranger Things had just come out and taken the world by storm, the whole ugly vaporwave shit came back in full swing, and so great, here's another new thing all about how freaking awesome the 80s were. As a South Park fan, I was also really bitter about Trey Parker agreeing to voice the antagonist, as if I personally knew the guy. You can't voice in a Minions movie, Trey Parker. Not after everything we had together. Still, though, I can't never talk about how blatant he is in interviews, clearly not giving a shit about any of this.
How much fun is it to join the franchise of Despicable Me?
It's fun. I'm not joining the franchise. It's not my way.
Okay, in 3 or 4, being one of the 24 people out there who was watching the Sonic Boom TV show, I knew that just a few months before this film released, they had done an episode with the exact same plot where the villain Dr. Eggman finds out he has a long-lost brother with long blonde hair.
Brother!
Who the snap are you?
Steve Eggman, your long-lost brother!
My brother! Gru!
Like, come on, that's a crazy coincidence, right? Anyways, like suspected, I fucking hated it when it came out. Although I loved the credits theme. I'd been singing that song's praise before it blew up on TikTok. I'm ahead of the curve. So Gru is now an agent for the AVL, except, no! Immediately he's fired from the Anti-Villain League after failing to stop Balthazar Brett, a washed-up child star from the 80s who's failed to move on from his past. Coincidentally, around that time, Gru is sought after by his brother Drew, who wants to finally meet his bro and have him teach him how to be a villain. He's so pathetic, he actually makes Gru look kinda cool. With this, we have a basic plot where Gru uses Drew's technology to try and steal the diamond back from Brett, which he secretly plans to use to get his job at the agency back.
Oh, I know, you could gamble online. That's what Katie's dad does.
Good suggestion. And let's not go over to Katie's house anymore.
Seems straightforward enough, but no! Wouldn't be a sequel to Despicable Me 2 without a series of B and C plots where nothing important happens. Agnes wants to find a unicorn, and so sets out to find one, while Margot is forced to lead on a gross, ugly fat kid who was falling for her. Ew, fat. Get out of here. Ugly. Nothing important happens with either of these. And Lucy has next to nothing to contribute. One movie in, and her role has already been boiled down to, she's the mom, as she tries to connect with the girls who seem to not truly let her in, even though, they really wanted her as a mom in the last one, whatever. And the Minions have never felt more disconnected from all this, as they pretty soon into the movie quit their role as Gru's minions. Again, is this a job, or... But that's actually a great idea. The Minions are supposed to serve the most despicable people, and so yeah, why would they stay with Gru? He hasn't been a villain for like 2 movies now. But all that comes of this is them roaming around aimlessly for a while, they wind up on a singing competition, get arrested, and spend a majority of the film in prison. And while that's where a lot of my entertainment from this comes from, it literally serves no purpose. It could be cut from the entire film and nothing would change. I literally think they only did this because the idea of Minions in black and white prison outfits was a silly idea, and I mean, sure, it kind of is, but yeah, that's it. At a certain point when the movie feels like wrapping up, the main minion, Mel, decides that he actually misses Gru in a flashback sequence that implies him and Gru have fucked, and so they head back to him, but again, I thought the Minions would die if they weren't serving someone despicable, just miss him enough to override that? Other than that, there's maybe like 2 funny jokes.
You never told me I had a brother, and you told me that dad died of disappointment when I was born.
The Minions say boobs at one point.
C'est Gru con boobs.
But for every somewhat funny joke, you get a million Liam needle drop moments, stupid drawn-out gags, and screaming goats. Sonic Boom had a screaming goat. Why do I know this? It's a very nice looking movie with bright colors and exaggerated animation, but again, we're 4 films in, and by this point the rest of the industry is more than caught up. A sleek CGI movie with bright colors is no longer impressive, if anything, it's the norm. Even then, this film, like the second, feels so closed off, taking place within the same 3 locations, Dru's high Sprat's base and a tiny Hollywood set, that's kinda it. I think Minions is a more visually impressive film, and it came out like 2 years earlier. Has there ever been a case where the spin-off is the more profitable franchise? Only this? It's kind of weird, right? Okay, this is a messy review of a very messy movie, incredibly overstuffed, unfocused. I'm honestly unsure of which I dislike more, this or Despicable Me 2. If I'm being totally honest, I think this one just barely edges it out, mainly due to the small charm that comes with Trey Parker voicing a villain in a kid's movie, doing his fucking Clyde Frog voice.
He was concerned that during the recent heist attempt, the Dumont diamond was replaced.
As well as it having a slightly more focused story than the second. Like, I think Gru dealing with a brother that's better than him in almost every way other than villainy, and that causing him to teeter the line and rediscover how good it makes him feel to be bad, is an interesting angle. Again, the franchise is called Despicable Me, yet bro hasn't done anything despicable since the first one. But it gets too caught up in giving the rest of the family something to do, and none of it contributes anything to the overall plot. Whatever screen time Lucy and the girls are given feels so forced, like they could have just been left at home this whole time. Like the writers are trying to find something for them to do, rather than feeling inspired enough to tell an actual story with them. See, in that case, the second one is actually better with how it incorporates the whole thing of Agnes wanting a mother, and so what you prefer really comes down to preference. Would you rather the crappy movie that remains focused on one central theme, but the theme is underdeveloped and revolves around a relationship you don't believe is genuine? Or a crappy movie that has a stronger core, a more engaging theme, but half the time winds up being dedicated to a series of C stories, none of which really amount to anything? And right now, I'm picking the latter. At the very least, I can say Despicable Me 3 goes by quickly enough. If it wasn't already clear enough with the Minions movie, Despicable Me 3 segmented that people's love for the Minions had long faded. Like I said, the Minions movie was the peak, but Despicable Me 3 kinda started the downfall of the Minions. Critics were starting to shit on this franchise hard, which spawned a very vocal minority of what I'm gonna call Illumination adults. You know those Disney adults who buy every pin at the theme parks and shit their pants, but it's okay because the smear looks like a hidden Mickey. Well, Illumination adults are that, but more embarrassing because, well, at least Disney makes good movies sometimes. One time I made fun of the trailer for Sing 2 and had a guy spamming my inbox for weeks about how wrong I was for doubting the masterful work that is Sing 2. Either way, none of this stopped Despicable Me 3 from raking in $1 billion at the box office. Not as much as Minions, but to this day, it's still the highest performing Despicable Me movie. So isn't it weird to think that we wouldn't see another sequel to it for 7 long, Gru-less years? It's true. See, the world was busy dealing with this little thing called the global pandemic, and that meant a lot of unfortunate things. Businesses closed, people lost their friends, their family, and Illumination couldn't release as many Minion movies. And while the wait was long, we eventually saw the return of the Kings, with the announcement of Minions 2, The Rise of Gru. I can't believe it's been almost 4 years since this movie came out. I thought it was 2. Again, there was a big gap between the last Despicable Me and this, not typical for Illumination, but again, this was a result of the COVID pandemic, with some of production being handled remotely. Originally supposed to release in July of 2020, it suffered a 2-year delay, pretty severe, although it wasn't a result of any production hiccups that came with the shift to remote work. In fact, the film was long completed, so why did it get delayed to 2021? And then further delayed to 2022? Boy, I just felt so bad for that one guy on Twitter. You had to be there. He was so upset about this. The Minions was his last beacon of hope through the pandemic, and Illumination betrayed him for one reason: money. Releasing a film to theaters during a global pandemic was not the smartest financial move. I mean, just look at the SpongeBob movie. They went ahead with their release and barely grossed $5 million total. Because of this, certain studios started dumping their new films on streaming instead, skipping the cinema altogether. At most, they'd charge like $20 to view it, but Illumination knew better. Sing 2 came out towards the end of the pandemic when you would think things were safe, and while it still did a respectable $400 million, I don't think there's any denying that Illumination were expecting more. And a Minions movie? Dude, that is like a guaranteed billion right there. We're not just gonna dump that on Peacock. What are we, stupid? What are we, cocks? And so they made people wait, and what happened in that time was completely unexpected. People started getting excited. Hey, if there's only one thing we've learned more and more in the past few years, it's that you can sell your movie on 2 things: brand recognition and memes.
Chicken jock!
This is where we saw the gentle Minions make their mark. People, and by people I mean teenage boys, started a campaign to show up at their local theaters dressed up in tuxedos for the premiere of Rise of Gru, and I gotta say, it was seen as a pretty positive thing at the time. Of course, there were some folks annoyed at how annoying they were, but others saw it as an innocent way to get people, especially those who were younger, eager to get back into theaters. Also, I think the Minecraft movie situation being 10 times more obnoxious have made the gentle Minions seem so much more quaint in turn. A result of this ironic enjoyment was the movie being received surprisingly well, but again, there had been such a long break since DM3 that the Minions had seen a slight but very noticeable dip in popularity, and so now that they weren't being constantly shoved in your face all the time, I don't know, it was kinda nice to see an animated film that was purely a slapstick comedy. Saying that, I was one of those people who went to go see this as a joke, not as a gentle Minion unfortunately, but instead because a friend of mine was in it. That was him, in a Hollywood movie. Wow. But honestly, I could not tell you a single thing about it in retrospect. Did they do a Kill Bill parody? That's all I remember. I actually really don't like the premise behind it either, as we finally get to see how Gru rose to be the most despicable guy in the world. You know, I thought the whole appeal of the Minions movies was that we got to see them away from Gru. Now we pretty much just have 2 separate film series running concurrently where everything is the exact same, just in one of them the guy's older and in one he's fucking younger. Maybe this came as a result of Illumination realizing how limiting the current approach to these movies are. Gru hasn't been a villain for a majority of the franchise, and so, hey, if you feature situations before he made this change, I guess it offers something new, but honestly, I'd rather them just keep this franchise and get rid of the main one then. So it's here the world is further expanded as we flash back to the 70s, where this group called the Vicious Six, more specifically the leader, Wild Knuckles, steals the Zodiac Stone before they betray him and kick him out of the group for being old. With this, they hold auditions for a new member and laugh Gru out of the place for being young, in which he steals the stone and the chase is on. Gru gets kidnapped and Kevin, Stewart, and Bob have to set out once again, this time to save him and learn to fight along the way or something. But whoa! Who's this new Minion? Well, this is Otto. The first time in a while we've seen a new Minion type. He's fatter and has braces. Why did we never see him in the previous films? well, I have to assume he passed away. The film's biggest issue is a lack of focus. Not to jump ahead too much, but I quickly realized that the reason I remembered virtually nothing from this film was because it is so scatterbrained, you never really know what the focus is. Otto goes off on a journey by himself to retrieve the stone after giving it away for a pet rock, which sends him on this massive adventure that we see maybe 2 minutes of. I honestly don't know why he's even here. And while all this is happening, we find out Gru's been kidnapped by Wild Knuckles, who becomes his mentor in a way. This is probably the film's strongest aspect, especially since Gru was established to not have a strong parental figure in his life. But it sadly has to split its screen time 3 ways, with the Otto stuff along with Kevin, Stewart, and Bob trying to rescue him, who, you know, he's not in danger, so what's the point? Early on, he's so mad at the Minions that he fires them, and so they're trying to have this angle of the Minions needing to train to prove themselves as being worthy, but it is so shallow, nothing happens. That first Minions movie feels like a real movie compared to Rise of Gru. Way too late into the film, they meet this old lady who helps them train. The leader of the Vicious Six kidnaps Gru and uses the stone to turn herself and the Minions into animals, and so they all use their animal powers to unleash their inner beasts, and they defeat them and save Gru. That is the movie. That's the entire movie there. There is nothing in between this, nothing deeper than we need to go here to get this, and then go here to save X. You know, there's nothing to it. What do we learn about the Rise of Gru? Well, Gru was a wide-eyed kid who met his hero, got kidnapped, and then was saved. What a rise to despicableness. I also hate the shit they pull with the references to past movies. They have this moment where Gru runs into Dr. Nefario and they treat these like it's a fucking Marvel moment. They literally leave a few seconds in here for you to clap.
Nefario.
That's Dr. Nefario.
Then at the end, the AVL jump in to arrest the bad guys, and the man walks up to Gru and says, "You better stay out of trouble, young man." And I'm like, who the fuck is clapping to this? Wow, it's that guy! It's also that lame-ass trope where every character has met and known every other character since they were kids, which only serves to make the world feel smaller and smaller. It is so stupid. Also, I thought Gru didn't know what the AVL was. It seems like he fucking met them. They go to the evil bank from the first movie, which was neat, but then they have to go up to the leader guy from the first film who pulls up a photo of Vector, and Gru has to look at the camera and say, huh, that guy looks weird. Yes! I know Rise of Gru, I've watched all these movies for some reason. See, I would say who cares, but when they insert all these fucking references and callbacks to their Minion lore, well, it seems like they do think you care about this shit. I'm shocked. I was not expecting to be this hateful to Minions 2: The Rise of Gru, but I really just do not like this film. I genuinely think it just got solid reviews because it had been so long since the last, and it was a meme to say it's good. But there is just nothing to this film. It is so shallow, possibly the most shallow of them all. Sure, it looks nice. I love the colors. It is such a bright and vibrant film. It looks wonderful. But I kinda think the first Minions movie looked better, and that was 7 years ago. I don't know, I know these movies have their fans, but I think this is my first truly hot take of this video. Do I just not get it? Am I not a gentle Minion? Apparently not, because Minions 2: The Rise of Gru might just be the worst one of all. Okay, Despicable Me 2 is still the worst, but I don't know. I watched this movie yesterday, and I still can't remember half the shit that happens in it, but again, I can see why folks enjoyed it. After a solid 1.5 years of pure isolation and fearing for the future, it was nice that everyone could finally come together and watch a stupid film with silly characters and a primary goal to make you laugh. Still sucks though, I don't like it, it's bad, I'm sorry. I still think DM2 is worse for how it feels as a sequel, and honestly, maybe if the film were called Minions 2, I'd be more negative due to how little attention Kevin, Stewart, and Bob get compared to the first. But for a movie titled The Rise of Gru, I really don't think it succeeds at what it sets out to do. Are we just always gonna have these now, these movies that we joke about ironically so much that it completely 180s and people start to seriously like it and get mad when you say something like, Minions: The Rise of Gru is not a good movie? All I know is, they'll always keep my comment section active. So it's been 7 years since Despicable Me 3, and in that time, Gru is fucked. That's right, he and Lucy now have a baby. I mean, we're 4 films in, what else can you do?
Well, I don't know if you know, but I did manage to steal the moon.
Yeah, 15 years ago, the baby contributes next to nothing. I mean, like, you know, it's a baby, they don't do much, but it's really only here for 2 reasons, and that's, 1, to give Gru something to work towards. The baby doesn't like him, you know, he saves it in the end, and it does like him now. Wow, what an important plot. But 2, the baby is here to be Jack. Now we get freaking adorkable baby antics. Minions have to change a diaper? It writes itself. Just take Jack from The Incredibles, combine it with the Boss Baby, and you have their kid, which only takes more attention away from the girls who contribute, again, nothing here. So this time around, the plot sees Gru get his old evil villain high school rival arrested by the AVL. However, after he escapes from prison and seeks revenge, Gru and his Gru family are sent into witness protection, where they have to start new lives altogether. Now, that's a funny idea, but this series has become so bloated with pointless characters that they don't really know what aspect of this to focus on. There's a scene where we see two of the girls go to karate class. One of them doesn't like that they have to pretend they're new people. That's literally it, they're just forgotten about from there. Margot's getting bullied at her new school. That's that, Gru just lets it happen. Instead, the film has to shove in more characters. Gru has a neighbor whose daughter knows of his past, but luckily she wants to be a supervillain and blackmails him into helping her with a heist to steal the evil villain academy's honey badger.
Honey Badger don't care.
Oh my god.
Ever hear of respecting your elders?
I don't respect boomers. I just mock them.
Holy fuck. Oh, just stop with this, I can't, please. I mean, why introduce another kid? Look, you have... Oh, the pink one. Edith. Okay, Edith. You have her. I mean, all the kids are a little bit older now, you know. She's a troublemaker, she likes creating chaos, and now she wants to seek an interest in villainy. Lucy finds out and tells Gru to have a talk with her, but here's the thing. He's kind of proud. He isn't fully opposed and allows this bonding time with his daughter to escalate as they do pettier and pettier crimes, and then, you know, it starts to build, and I don't know, you do something with that. Gru realizes he is a baby and he doesn't want it to be evil, so he can't set a bad example, and hey, I just had 3 beers and I thought of that. Illumination, hire me. That would be something, right? Something for one of the girls to do, because they really have nothing, because they really have had nothing to contribute for like 3 films now. I mean, just look at the posters. The other Despicable Me movies did the generic family film thing, white background with PNGs or a crowd shot of the Minions, what do you expect? But I remember when this one was coming out, I was surprised at how stylish they were, focusing on this harsh orange and purple color palette. That is not reflected in the film at all. Wait, why does this poster say he's going undercover? No, he's not. He's going into witness protection. Who owns this house? That is not the house they stay in. The villain completely wastes a Will Ferrell performance. Isn't it strange this franchise started by competing with a Will Ferrell DreamWorks movie, and now here we are, he's voicing the main antagonist? I mean, if you could even call him that. He and Gru barely interacted the entire film. He spends like an hour of it just looking for him. And okay, you know, just look at this character design. If you haven't seen the movie, I don't blame you, but what do you assume his power would be? Well, he's like wearing this shiny green puffer jacket, so you'd assume he's like a millionaire or something. The slick back hair, the snooty nose. He loves cockroaches. That's it. He has an army of them and turns himself into a cockroach and wants to get back at Gru by turning his baby into a cockroach. What is this? It's pure nonsense. Nothing interesting happens in this film. Lucy? What does she add? Well, she gets a job at a nail salon, tells the lady she's an awesome hairdresser. Guess what happens? Just guess. She messes up her hair. That's the end of that! There's a scene where Gru has to play tennis with his new neighbors who don't like him, and the joke is that he's bad at it and the minions help him. You know, in a story about witness protection, when do you assume a scene like that would take place? First 20 minutes, halfway through? This happens an hour and 10 minutes into the film. There's only 20 minutes left by the time they get to this basic idea. And, oh yeah, the Minions! Where the fuck are they? You know, I was confused because the Minions, aside from 2 or 3 of them, don't go with Gru. Instead, they're all taken into the AVL, so, you know, what do they contribute? Well, the Anti-Villain League starts conducting experiments on them, which leads to a group of them becoming superheroes. The Mega Minions. Make a couple $100 million on those toys. There is a single scene where they go out for a night and obviously cause havoc on the town. And that's it until the end of the film, where they come out of retirement to help Gru, but by the time they get there, Gru has already fixed the problem himself. It is nothing. It is a nothing movie. Why are the Super Minions here? Apparently this was a scrapped concept from the second film, but I don't know, maybe it was scrapped for a reason. They add nothing. The Minions have gone from complimenting Gru, to the plot hinging on them, to a weird breakup arc, to just not having anything to do with the story at all. These are like 2 different movies happening concurrently. What can they possibly do with the Despicable Me 5? I mean, What ground is there left to cover? Gru got the Mexican man arrested in the second as well as Balthazar in the third. In what way could he possibly go to a villain high school reunion without everyone knowing he works for the good guys now? And then the film has the audacity, the nerve, to end with a dance party ending where Gru sings Everybody Wants to Rule the World with Will Ferrell, and in the prison is everyone. All the villains from the previous movies appear, even though I thought Vector got trapped on the moon. You made a whole fucking short about that. Maybe he goes back to Earth. I'm not watching it. Why is Scarlet here? I thought she got arrested in England. She lived in England. I just don't understand how, in any way, they thought they could get away with what should be a massive moment, all the previous villains on screen again, with such a throwaway story. There has been no feeling of evolution. This ending is not earned, because this film could have just as easily been Despicable Me 2 or 3 and worked just as well. Or, not well, I suppose. This movie was not eventful, these villains are not iconic, and so this whole sequence just comes off like Illumination trying to force a moment they could never in their lives pull off. What, is this the last one? No, because 5 is coming out in 2028 or 2029, in which you can't really pull this reunion shit again. This film did not perform as well as I'm sure they were hoping for, making around $700 million, the lowest box office since that first one. Still a great amount, don't get me wrong, doing a whole lot better than other animated films these days. But compared to the previous films, it is a dip. And so I think the next will need to do a whole lot more than just ride the line, coasting by on name recognition alone. We're leaving the franchise on a very sour note, but don't get me wrong, this was not nearly as much of a slog as I thought it would be. Sure, those last 2 films did close us out in a whimper, even if I do know that people like that second Minions movie. But really, to answer the question we started with, were the Despicable Me movies really that bad? I don't know, kind of not. A boring answer, I know, but the reality is these movies were never the death of cinema that people made them out to be during their prime. That whole era of treating the Minions like some cultural apocalypse was, of course, way overblown, and maybe I'm slightly more positive now due to them not being as oversaturated as they were around the time of Despicable Me 3 or the Minion movie. But people were so hard on those movies and Illumination that eventually, as time went on, folks came to realize that maybe they were being a little too hard on what were essentially inoffensive kids' films. But now, I think they're getting a little bit too much slack. Because shit like Despicable Me 4 is bad. It is a bad movie, but, going back to the rest, there was clearly some effort put into them. The animation is consistently solid, the voice acting can be strong. The first film has a genuinely simple but effective story. Like, you can't tell me you don't see why they got so big. But, at the same time, they were never great. They peaked with the first one, and got way too comfortable with relying on Minions, and so they quickly turned into these bloated, unfocused, just throw step at the screen kind of movies. Characters stop developing, plots stop mattering, and everything starts feeling like it exists just to solely keep the brand alive rather than telling an actual story. So no, the Despicable Me movies are not as bad as people said they were back then, but they are also not some secretly misunderstood masterpieces either. They are products. And sometimes, that can be fine. Sometimes they're fucking dog shit though.